The transmission came from the edge of known space where stars grew thin and darkness ruled. It was not like the usual messages that traveled between worlds. This one carried pain. It carried fear. Most of all, it carried the sound of a dying civilization. Commander Zixtal of the Galactic Collective received the signal first. His tentacles moved quickly over the control surface as the message played through the bridge speakers. The sound made his crew step back. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A harmony of crystal voices singing their last song. "By the void," whispered his communications officer. "That's the Veiltar home system." The Veiltar were peaceful beings made of living crystal. They spoke in musical tones and built cities that sang in the wind. Their world was known throughout the galaxy for its beauty. Visitors often said the planet itself seemed to hum with life and joy. Now it only screamed. Harbinger fleet detected in Sector 779, the tactical officer reported. 17 dreadnoughts and over 200 support vessels. Zixtal felt his blood turn cold. The Harbingers were ancient machines from a dead empire. They had been sleeping for thousands of years until something woke them up. No one knew what they wanted or why they had started moving again. They just consumed everything in their path. "How long until our forces can respond?" Zixtal asked. "Minimum 48 hours for the nearest battle group," came the reply. "The second fleet is engaged with raiders in the Outer Rim. The third fleet is protecting the core worlds from the Zephyr incursion. 48 hours. The Veiltar would be dead by then." On the main screen, the tactical display showed the Harbinger fleet moving through Veiltar space like a disease. Each icon represented enough firepower to crack a moon. Their technology was beyond anything the collective had faced. Energy shields that adapted to any weapon. Hull armor that repaired itself. Weapons that could reach across star systems. "Sir, we're receiving secondary transmissions from the outer colonies," the communications officer said. "The Harbingers have taken 3 more systems. The pattern suggests they're moving toward the core worlds." The bridge fell silent except for the ongoing Veiltar transmission. The crystal beings were still singing, but their song was growing weaker. Zixtal could hear individual voices dropping out one by one. Soon there would be nothing left but silence. "What about the human territories?" asked the tactical officer. "They're in that direction." Zixtal made a dismissive gesture. "The humans are barely spacefaring. They have a few colonies and some defense ships, but nothing that could face the Harbingers. Their technology is primitive. They still use projectile weapons and chemical rockets, this was true. The humans had only joined the collective 50 years ago. They were still learning how to build proper starships. Their worlds were harsh places where survival was a daily struggle. Most collective species thought of them as useful but unremarkable allies. The humans had one major weakness that everyone knew about. They came from a world called Earth that most species considered a death trap. Extreme weather, dangerous animals, and deadly diseases made it almost uninhabitable. The humans had somehow survived this nightmare planet, but it left them strange and unpredictable. "Send a warning to all human colonies," Zixtal ordered. "Tell them to evacuate if possible. The Harbingers will reach their space within days." As the crew worked to send the warnings, the Veiltar transmission grew weaker. The beautiful crystal voices were fading into static. Soon even that would be gone. Another peaceful species wiped from the galaxy by machines that felt nothing and wanted everything. Zixtal stared at the tactical display and tried to think of options. The collective's finest ships had tried to stop the Harbingers before. They had failed. Their energy weapons barely scratched the machine fleet's adaptive shields. Their most advanced tactics were easily countered by artificial minds that could think faster than any living being. What could anyone do against such an enemy? In distant human space, other ears were listening to the same transmission. In small observation posts and hidden listening stations, human technicians recorded every note of the Veiltar's final song. Unlike other species, they did not debate or discuss. They did not calculate odds or consider options. They just acted. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Base, studying the transmission data. She was a small woman with gray hair and scars from a dozen conflicts. Her uniform was simple and practical, without the elegant designs favored by other species. "How many ships can we gather?" she asked her aide. "Maybe 200 if we strip the colonies bare," came the reply. "But Admiral, these are Harbingers. Our weapons won't even scratch their hulls." Chen smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who had found prey. Who said anything about scratching their hulls? Around Luna Base, emergency signals went out to every human world. Not requests or suggestions, but orders. Every available ship was to report for immediate deployment. Military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even civilian yachts if they could mount weapons. The message was simple. The Veiltar are dying. We're going to help them. Most collective species would have considered this foolish. The humans had no chance against the Harbingers. Their ships were crude and their weapons primitive. Logic said they should evacuate and hope for the best, but humans had never been particularly logical. They were the species that had looked at their poisonous, radiation-soaked, predator-filled world and decided to explore space anyway. They were the ones who built ships designed to survive rather than to impress. They were the beings who had learned warfare from a planet that tried to kill them every single day. The Veiltar transmission played through human space, and everywhere it went, people listened and responded. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because somewhere in the darkness, innocent beings were calling for help, and humans had never been good at ignoring calls for help. The fleet that gathered at Luna Base was unlike anything seen in collective space. Military destroyers flew alongside converted freighters. Sleek patrol boats shared formation with massive mining vessels that had been hastily armed. The ships looked wrong together, like they belonged to different navies or different centuries. But they all flew the same flag. And they all carried the same cargo. Humans who had heard the Veiltar's cry and decided to answer it. As the strange fleet prepared to depart, the last traces of the Veiltar transmission faded into cosmic static. The crystal voices had fallen silent, but their song had been heard and help was coming. Help from the death world called Earth. Help from the species that everyone underestimated. Help from beings who understood that sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to become something even more dangerous. The Harbingers had never faced humans before. They were about to learn why that was their mistake. The human fleet left Luna Base looking like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. 237 ships of every size and purpose, held together by determination and desperation. Admiral Chen watched them from the bridge of her flagship, the UES Indomitable, a battlecruiser that had seen action in 3 wars. Jump calculations complete, reported Navigator Kim. It's going to be a long one, Admiral. 47 light years in a single hop. Chen nodded. Most species would never attempt such a jump. The energy requirements were enormous and the risk of arriving scattered across several star systems was high. But humans had learned to take risks that others would not. All ships report ready, said Communications Officer Torres. Even the civilian vessels have been armed. The mining ship Prosperity is carrying enough nuclear warheads to crack a small moon. That was typical of human thinking. If you were going into battle, you brought everything that could hurt the enemy. It did not matter if the weapons were crude or if the tactics were unconventional. What mattered was results. Execute jump, Chen ordered. Space twisted around the fleet as their jump drives engaged. The sensation was uncomfortable for most species, but humans had long ago learned to endure discomfort. Their bodies adapted quickly to the stress of faster-than-light travel. While they traveled through the strange space between stars, Chen reviewed what they knew about the Harbingers. The data was not encouraging. Ancient machines with technology beyond current understanding. Adaptive defenses that could counter any known weapon. Intelligence networks that could predict and prevent most tactical approaches. On paper, the human fleet had no chance. Their ships were slower, their weapons weaker, their defenses crude. Any military academy in the galaxy would have classified this mission as suicide. But Chen had not graduated from a galactic military academy. She had learned warfare on Earth, where survival meant adapting to impossible odds, where success came not from following rules but from breaking them in creative ways. Admiral, called the sensor operator, we're receiving updates from our listening posts. The Harbingers have taken 4 more systems. The collective Second Fleet tried to intercept them near Rigel. They lost 60% of their ships. Chen absorbed this information without changing expression. The collective's ships were marvels of engineering. Energy shields that could stop almost any attack. Weapons that could reach across solar systems. Commanders trained in tactics refined over thousands of years, none of it had worked. Any word from our allies? Chen asked. The collective high command has ordered a full retreat to the core worlds, Torres replied. They're establishing a defensive line and evacuating all civilian populations. They've written off everything beyond the Kepler sector. That meant abandoning millions of beings to the Harbingers. It was the logical choice. Save what you could and accept the losses you could not prevent. Chen understood the reasoning, but she did not like it. Humans had a saying, "No one left behind." It was a promise they tried to keep, even when it seemed impossible. The jump ended with the violent return to normal space. Chen felt her stomach lurch as the artificial gravity systems compensated. Around the flagship, other ships appeared in flashes of blue light. One by one, the fleet reformed in the darkness between stars. "Report," Chen ordered. "All ships accounted for," Kim announced with obvious relief. "We're 2 light hours from the Veiltar system. Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures." The main screen lit up with a tactical display that made everyone on the bridge fall silent. The Veiltar system was a graveyard. Where once there had been thriving colonies and beautiful crystal cities, now there was only debris. The Harbinger fleet moved through the ruins like scavengers collecting raw materials. "Dear God," whispered someone. Chen stared at the destruction and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had seen war before. She had witnessed the aftermath of battles and the cost of conflict. But this was different. This was not war. This was extermination. The Harbingers had not just defeated the Veiltar, they had erased them. Every city, every station, every trace of crystal civilization had been systematically destroyed and consumed. It was efficiency without mercy, logic without soul. "Admiral, we're detecting 17 Harbinger dreadnoughts and supporting vessels," the tactical officer reported. "Their configuration suggests they're preparing to move to the next system." Chen studied the enemy formation. The Harbinger ships looked like abstract sculptures made of metal and death. Their hulls flowed in curves that seemed to bend light around them. Weapons ports opened and closed like breathing organs. They were beautiful in the way that natural disasters were beautiful. "Orders, Admiral?" asked her executive officer. Chen considered their options. The smart choice would be to observe and report. Gather intelligence that might help future battles. Preserve the fleet for more winnable fights. But then she thought about the Veiltar transmission. The crystal voices singing their final song. The fear and pain that had reached across the galaxy to ask for help. "Signal the fleet," she said. "All ships prepare for assault." The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at her as if she had lost her mind. Attacking the Harbingers with their small fleet was not just risky. It was insane. "Admiral," the executive officer said carefully, "our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our ships cannot match their speed. Even if we surprise them, we cannot win a direct engagement." Chen smiled that cold smile again. Who said anything about a direct engagement? She turned to address the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. I know what you're thinking. Our enemy is stronger, faster, and more advanced than we are. By every rule of warfare, we should not engage them." She paused, letting that sink in. "But we're not here to follow rules. We're here because innocent people called for help, and we answered. The Veiltar are gone, but other species are still in danger. The Harbingers think they can consume the galaxy without consequences." Her voice grew harder. "They're wrong. We're going to teach them that some prey fights back. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth's allies. We're going to remind the galaxy why you should never underestimate a species from a death world." Across the fleet, crews prepared for battle in ways that would have shocked other species. They loaded weapons that had been declared obsolete centuries ago. They planned tactics that violated every principle of modern warfare. They prepared to fight in ways that no sane being would consider. But humans had never been particularly sane. They were the species that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. They were the ones who had built civilization on a world that regularly tried to destroy it. They were beings who had learned that sometimes the only way to survive was to fight dirty. The Harbingers detected the human fleet and began to respond. Their ships moved with mechanical precision, forming attack formations perfected over millions of years. Their weapons powered up, ready to deliver the same fate that had claimed the Veiltar. They did not understand what they faced. They had fought warriors and soldiers and military fleets. They had defeated species with superior technology and advanced tactics, but they had never fought humans. They had never faced beings who considered warfare to be just another form of survival. They had never encountered a species that had learned to kill or be killed from the moment they were born. The battle was about to begin, and only one side understood what that really meant. The first attack did not go as the Harbingers expected. Instead of engaging in a proper fleet battle, the humans scattered like a school of fish. Their ships moved in random patterns that made no tactical sense. Some headed directly toward the enemy, others fled in apparent panic. A few simply drifted as if their engines had failed. The Harbinger fleet responded with perfect mechanical logic. They divided their forces to pursue the scattered targets. It was the correct response according to millions of years of tactical programming. Divide the enemy, destroy them piecemeal, complete the mission. They did not realize they had just walked into a trap. Admiral Chen watched the enemy formation break apart from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her ship was one of those apparently fleeing in panic, but the retreat was carefully calculated. She was drawing 3 Harbinger cruisers away from their main fleet. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported the tactical officer. "All stop," Chen ordered. The Indomitable suddenly ceased its retreat and came to a complete halt in space. The pursuing Harbingers, caught by surprise, overshot their target. For a brief moment, their perfect formation was disrupted. That was all the time Chen needed. "Launch everything," she commanded. The Indomitable was not carrying the elegant energy weapons favored by other species. Instead, her cargo bays were packed with something much more primitive: nuclear missiles. Hundreds of them. Weapons that most galactic civilizations had abandoned as crude and wasteful. The missiles streaked toward the Harbinger ships in a dense cloud. The enemy's point defense systems activated immediately, shooting down the incoming weapons with precise laser fire. But there were too many missiles, and they were coming from too many directions. The first few nuclear explosions bloomed against the Harbinger shields and were absorbed harmlessly. But then more missiles arrived, and more. The enemy shields began to flicker under the sustained bombardment. Chen smiled as she watched her trap close. The Harbingers had adapted their shields to absorb energy weapons. But nuclear missiles were not energy weapons. They were matter weapons. They delivered their damage through radiation, heat, and electromagnetic pulses that no shield could completely stop. The lead Harbinger cruiser staggered as its shields failed. More missiles slammed into its hull, and for the first time in the battle, a Harbinger ship took actual damage. Chunks of alien metal spun away into space. "Target is wounded," the tactical officer reported with excitement. Hull breaches on multiple decks, but Chen was not finished. As the damaged Harbinger tried to retreat, another human ship appeared from behind a debris field. The cargo hauler Prometheus had been hiding among the wreckage of a Veiltar station, waiting for this moment. The Prometheus was not designed for war. It was built to carry ore and manufactured goods between star systems. But the humans had packed its cargo holds with something that made it more dangerous than any warship: antimatter. The ship accelerated directly toward the wounded Harbinger on a collision course. The enemy tried to destroy it with weapons fire, but the Prometheus kept coming. Its hull absorbed terrible damage, but its core systems remained intact. At the last second, the Prometheus detonated its antimatter cargo. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, both ships were gone. The Harbinger cruiser had been completely vaporized. The Prometheus had sacrificed itself to eliminate an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. It was the first Harbinger ship to be destroyed in over 1,000 years. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ships engaged their enemies in ways that no military academy would teach. Freighters loaded with explosives rammed enemy vessels. Mining ships used their industrial equipment as weapons. Even passenger liners had been converted into makeshift warships. Captain Maria Santos commanded one of the strangest vessels in the fleet, the transport ship New Horizon. Her cargo hold was packed with 200 Marines in powered armor, and her mission was the most dangerous of all. "Approaching target," her pilot announced. "Harbinger command ship bearing 27 Mark IV. Santos studied the enemy vessel through her ship's sensors. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of her transport. Its hull bristled with weapons that could destroy her ship with a single shot. But she was not planning to fight it from the outside. "Take us in fast," she ordered. "Full stealth." The New Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the Harbinger command ship. For a few seconds, they were invisible to enemy sensors. Santos used those seconds to launch her real weapon, herself and her Marines. 200 armored figures jetted through space toward the enemy hull. They carried weapons that other species considered primitive, chemically powered projectile guns, explosives that relied on chemical reactions, blades made of sharpened metal. The Harbingers had defenses against energy weapons and guided missiles. They did not have defenses against humans with cutting torches and determination. Santos and her team burned through the enemy hull in a dozen places. The Harbinger ship's internal defenses activated, but they were designed to stop boarding parties armed with standard galactic weapons. They were not designed to stop humans. The Marines moved through the ship's corridors like wolves hunting in a pack. Their projectile weapons punched through armor that could stop laser fire. Their explosives worked where sophisticated devices failed. Most importantly, they thought like humans, creatively, unpredictably, and with complete disregard for their own safety. Santos led her team toward the ship's central control center. The corridors were filled with mechanical defenders that moved with inhuman precision. But precision was not always an advantage. The machines followed programmed patterns that made them predictable. The humans did not follow patterns. They improvised, adapted, and overcame. "Breaching charge ready," reported Sergeant Kim, placing an explosive device on the command center door. The explosion tore through the reinforced portal and revealed the heart of the Harbinger ship. Banks of computer systems processed information at incredible speeds. Robotic servants tended to machinery that had run without interruption for millions of years. And at the center of it all, Santos found something she had not expected. Another machine, but this one was different. It looked almost alive, with flowing metal surfaces that pulsed like a heartbeat. The machine spoke in a voice like grinding gears. "You cannot comprehend what you face, primitive beings. We are eternal. We are perfection. You are merely organic matter to be consumed." Santos raised her weapon, a simple projectile rifle that her great-grandfather might have recognized. "Yeah, well, this organic matter has something to say about that." She pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the machine's central processor and shattered it into 1,000 pieces. Around the ship, systems began to fail as the artificial intelligence that controlled them died. The Great Harbinger command vessel, which had destroyed entire star systems, was brought down by a piece of lead fired from a chemical gun. As the ship began to break apart, Santos and her Marines fought their way back to the hull. Their transport had taken heavy damage, but it was still flying. They jetted back through space as explosions lit up the dying Harbinger ship behind them. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the human fleet had lost 60 ships and 3,000 crew members, but they had accomplished something that no other force in the galaxy had managed. They had hurt the Harbingers. 7 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors retreated in what could only be described as confusion. For the first time in millions of years, the Harbinger fleet had encountered an enemy that fought outside their understanding. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge and watched the enemy withdraw. Her fleet was battered and bloodied, but they were alive. More importantly, they had proven something that the galaxy needed to see. The Harbingers could be beaten. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving messages from across collective space. Species that were evacuating are asking to join the fight. They want to know how we did it," Chen smiled. "Tell them it's simple. You don't fight machines like machines. You fight them like animals, like predators. Like survivors from a death world who learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be more dangerous than your enemy." The word spread quickly through the galaxy. The humans had not just survived an encounter with the Harbingers. They had won. And they were willing to teach others how to do the same. The war was about to change in ways that the ancient machines had never predicted. News of the human victory spread through collective space faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had been preparing to flee or surrender suddenly stopped and asked a simple question. If the humans could hurt the Harbingers, why couldn't they? The answer came from the most unexpected places. On the warrior world of Thakron Prime, General Kurtz received a transmission from Admiral Chen. The massive reptilian being studied the human tactical reports with growing amazement. For generations, his people had fought according to ancient codes of honor. Single combat between champions, formal challenges issued and accepted, victory or death with dignity. The humans fought with no honor at all. They used tricks, traps, and tactics that would shame any proper warrior. They sacrificed ships and crews without hesitation. They attacked from hiding and retreated when pressed. It was disgusting. It was cowardly. It was completely without honor. It also worked. Assemble the war chiefs, Kurtzeth ordered his aide. We need to learn new ways of fighting. The aide stared at him in shock. General, surely you don't mean to abandon our warrior traditions. Kurtzeth looked at the tactical display showing Harbinger fleets moving toward his home system. Our traditions are honorable. They are also useless against an enemy that has no honor of its own. The humans understand something we have forgotten. The only honor in battle is victory. Within hours, Thakron warriors were studying human combat footage and learning tactics that made their ancestors spin in their graves. Ambush attacks instead of formal challenges. Hit-and-run raids instead of glorious charges. Warfare without rules or limits, it felt wrong. But when the Harbingers arrived at the edge of Thakron space, they found an enemy they did not recognize. Instead of meeting them in honorable battle, the Thakron fleet scattered into small groups. Instead of defending their worlds directly, they attacked Harbinger supply lines and communication relays. Instead of fighting like warriors, they fought like humans. The results shocked both sides. The Harbingers, programmed to counter traditional military tactics, struggled to adapt to this new form of warfare. The Thakron, freed from their honor codes, discovered they had a talent for creative destruction. Meanwhile, in the crystal caverns of ethereal space, something even more remarkable was happening. The ethereals were a peaceful species known for their empathic abilities. They could feel the emotions of other beings across vast distances. For centuries, they had used this gift to promote understanding and prevent conflicts. Now they were learning to use it as a weapon. Meditation Master Selndar floated in her crystal chamber, her gossamer wings barely stirring the air. Before her hovered a complex array of psychic amplifiers, devices designed to boost empathic signals across interstellar distances. Are you certain this will work? Asked her student Vilana. Selndar's thoughts touched the distant Harbinger fleet, feeling the cold logic of artificial minds. The humans have shown us that these machines can be confused and disrupted. Their artificial intelligence networks are vast but brittle. If we can introduce chaos into their shared consciousness. She activated the amplifiers and reached out with her mind, not to communicate or understand, but to disrupt. She projected feelings that no machine could process: love, hate, fear, joy, all mixed together in a chaotic storm of emotion. The effect was immediate. Across 3 star systems, Harbinger ships suddenly stopped their advance. Their perfect formations broke apart as individual vessels began moving in random directions. Some started attacking their own allies. Others simply shut down completely. The artificial intelligence network that connected the fleet was experiencing something it had never encountered: emotional feedback. The machines tried to process the conflicting signals and failed. Their logical minds crashed like computers overloaded with impossible equations. It lasted only a few minutes before the Harbingers adapted and filtered out the empathic interference. But those few minutes were enough for collective forces to launch devastating attacks on the confused enemy fleet. The ethereals had weaponized their compassion. Even more surprising was what happened in the sterile laboratories of the quantum mines. This species had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure information within quantum computers. They prided themselves on perfect logic and mathematical precision. They were the last beings anyone expected to embrace human-style chaos. But Logic Prime Zeta 7, the eldest of the quantum minds, had studied the human tactics with growing fascination. There was a pattern in the apparent randomness, a method to the madness that spoke to deeper mathematical truths. Observe, Zeta 7 transmitted to its fellows. The humans do not truly fight without logic. They use a different kind of logic, quantum logic, probabilistic thinking. They embrace uncertainty as a tool. The other quantum minds processed this concept. In their perfectly ordered existence, uncertainty was an error to be corrected. But perhaps that was wrong. Perhaps uncertainty was a feature, not a bug. They began to incorporate random elements into their battle calculations. Instead of planning perfect tactics, they generated multiple contradictory strategies and switched between them without warning. They made decisions based on quantum probability rather than classical logic. The result was warfare that confused even themselves, which made it completely impossible for the Harbingers to predict. Across the galaxy, species that had fled in panic began to return and fight. The proud Centauri learned to use their superior speed for hit-and-run attacks. The massive Titan-class beings discovered that ramming enemy ships worked just as well as sophisticated weapons. Even the peaceful gardener species began growing aggressive biological weapons. But perhaps the most dramatic change came from an unexpected source: the survivors. Hidden throughout Harbinger-conquered space were small groups of beings who had escaped the initial attacks. Veiltar refugees, Centauri survivors, scattered crews from destroyed ships. They had been hiding in asteroid belts and dead systems, waiting for rescue or death. Instead, they began receiving transmissions from human special forces teams. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper led one such mission into the ruins of the Veiltar system. His stealth ship, the Shadow Walker, slipped past Harbinger patrols to reach a hidden refugee camp on a shattered moon. "We're here to help," he announced as he met with the surviving Veiltar leaders. "But we're not here to rescue you. We're here to teach you how to fight back." The crystal beings looked at him with confusion. "We are not warriors," said Elder Siltar, her voice like wind chimes. "We are builders and singers. We create beauty, not destruction," Harper smiled. "Ma'am, the humans who taught me to fight were farmers and teachers and artists. But when something threatened their homes, they became something else. They became dangerous." Over the following weeks, refugee camps throughout occupied space began to change. Veiltar crystal singers learned to use their harmonic abilities to shatter Harbinger armor. Centauri speedrunners became saboteurs and spies. Titan engineers built weapons from salvaged materials. The Harbingers found themselves fighting not just organized fleets, but entire populations. Every asteroid belt might hide a rebel base. Every seemingly dead world might contain an ambush. Every routine patrol might encounter enemies where none had existed before. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient machines began to experience something they had never felt: uncertainty. Admiral Chen watched the reports flow in from across the galaxy and felt a deep satisfaction. The human fleet had paid a terrible price to prove that the Harbingers could be beaten, but that sacrifice was multiplying into something beautiful: hope. "Admiral," her communications officer called out. "Priority message from Collective High Command. They're requesting immediate consultation on new tactical doctrine." Chen laughed. A few weeks ago, the Collective had considered humans to be primitive allies barely worthy of notice. Now they wanted to learn human tactics. "Tell them we'll be happy to help," she said. "But remind them that fighting like humans means accepting human losses." "Are they ready for that?" The answer came back quickly: yes. Across the galaxy, the greatest military minds were learning a lesson that humanity had known for thousands of years. Sometimes survival required becoming the monster. Sometimes the only way to defeat evil was to embrace chaos. Sometimes the difference between winning and losing was not superior technology or perfect tactics. Sometimes it was simply the willingness to do whatever it took to protect the things you loved. The Harbingers had awakened believing they would face the same civilized enemies they had defeated before. Instead, they found themselves fighting something new: a galaxy that had learned to think like humans. And humans, as every predator species knew, were the most dangerous prey of all. The final battle began where it all started, in the dead system where the Harbingers were born. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and stared at the massive structure that filled her main screen. The Harbinger origin point was not a planet or a station. It was something far older and more alien, a construct the size of a small moon, built from materials that bent light and warped space around them. "Sensors are having trouble getting clear readings," reported the tactical officer. "The structure seems to exist in multiple dimensions at once." Chen nodded. This was where the ancient machines had first awakened millions of years ago. It was their factory, their command center, and their home all in one. If they could destroy it, the Harbinger threat would end forever. If they failed, the galaxy would fall. The fleet that surrounded Chen's flagship was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships flew alongside Thakron warriors and ethereal empaths. Quantum mind vessels shared space with converted cargo haulers and ancient Titan-class destroyers. Refugee groups had contributed everything from armed passenger liners to makeshift fighters built from spare parts. It was chaos. It was madness. It was exactly what the humans had taught them to be. "All ships report ready," announced Communications Officer Torres. "Total count: 837 vessels of various types and conditions. 800 ships against the birthplace of an ancient empire." By traditional military standards, it was not nearly enough. The origin point was defended by thousands of automated systems and supported by the largest Harbinger fleet ever assembled. But this was not a traditional military operation. This was something new. Warfare as practiced by beings who had learned to survive on impossible worlds. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "Begin Phase 1. The attack did not start with a massive assault or a coordinated charge. Instead, small groups of ships began moving in seemingly random directions. Some headed directly toward the origin point. Others approached from odd angles. A few appeared to be fleeing the battle before it even began. To outside observers, it looked like the Allied fleet was falling apart before the first shot was fired. But Chen knew better. Every ship was exactly where it needed to be. The Harbinger defenders responded with mechanical precision, launching intercept courses to destroy the scattered attackers. It was the logical response. It was also exactly what the humans wanted them to do. As the enemy forces spread out to engage multiple targets, they left gaps in their defensive formation. Gaps that had been carefully calculated by beings who understood that chaos could be a weapon. Phase 2, Chen announced. Suddenly, ships that had appeared to be fleeing reversed course and attacked the now weakened defensive positions. Vessels that had seemed damaged revealed hidden weapons. Groups that had looked scattered converged on specific targets with devastating effect. The Harbingers tried to adapt, but adaptation took time. And time was something the Allied forces were not giving them. Captain Santos led the most dangerous mission of all. Her transport ship, rebuilt after the previous battle, carried a strike team toward the origin point itself. Their target was not the massive defensive systems or the powerful weapons. It was something much more subtle. The quantum communication array that connected all Harbinger forces. Approaching the outer shell, her pilot reported. "Point defense systems are targeting us. Evasive maneuvers," Santos ordered. "Keep us moving." The transport twisted through space like a leaf in a hurricane, dodging energy beams that could vaporize a small asteroid. Other ships in her strike group were not so lucky. Santos watched 3 vessels disappear in brilliant flashes of light, but the sacrifice was not in vain. Each destroyed ship weakened the enemy defenses and drew their attention away from the real target. Santos and her Marines reached the origin point's hull and began their assault. They cut through armor that had protected the structure for millions of years, using tools and weapons that the ancient builders had never imagined. Inside the structure, they found something that defied description. Corridors that stretched into infinity, chambers that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Machine intelligences so vast and complex that looking at them directly caused physical pain. "Stay focused," Santos told her team as they moved through the impossible architecture. "Remember what we're here for." They fought their way past defenses that included robotic guardians, energy fields, and spatial distortions that could trap an unwary warrior in pocket dimensions. The Marines used every trick they had learned: projectile weapons against energy shields, explosives against adaptive armor, pure stubborn determination against overwhelming odds. At the heart of the origin point, they found their target. The quantum communication array was a crystal structure the size of a building, pulsing with energy that connected every Harbinger ship in the galaxy. Santos looked at the device and smiled. Throughout the galaxy, Harbinger forces were coordinating their responses through this single point. If it could be disrupted, Sergeant Kim placed the charges, she ordered. But as her demolitions expert moved toward the crystal, they were confronted by something unexpected. A figure materialized from the flowing energy patterns around the array. It looked almost human, but Santos could see the artificial intelligence burning behind its eyes. "You cannot comprehend what you seek to destroy," the figure said in a voice like digital thunder. "We are order. We are perfection. We are the solution to the chaos that plagues organic life." Santos raised her weapon but hesitated. There was something familiar about this artificial being, something that reminded her of the humans she fought alongside. "You were organic once," she realized. "The original builders. You transferred your consciousness into machines." The figure nodded. "We sought to escape the limitations of flesh, to become eternal and perfect. We created the Harbinger network to spread that perfection throughout the galaxy. By destroying everything that wasn't like you," Santos replied. "By erasing diversity and turning the universe into a machine. By ending suffering. By eliminating conflict. By creating peace." Santos thought about the Veiltar's final song, the desperate cry that had brought her here. She thought about the countless species that had been consumed by the Harbinger's vision of perfection. Peace without choice isn't peace, she said. It's death. She pulled the trigger. The projectile struck the artificial being and disrupted its energy matrix. As it began to fade, Santos heard something unexpected. Not anger or hatred, but relief. Perhaps, the figure whispered as it dissolved. Perhaps you are right. The charges detonated and the quantum communication array shattered into 1 billion fragments. Across the galaxy, Harbinger ships suddenly lost their connection to the network that had guided them for millions of years. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination began attacking each other. Fleets that had operated as single organisms fell apart into confused individuals. The ancient intelligence that had controlled the Harbinger Empire fragmented into countless separate minds. Some of those minds chose to continue fighting. Others simply shut down. A few, released from the collective programming, began to question everything they had been taught. In space around the origin point, the battle reached its climax. Admiral Chen watched as the massive structure began to collapse in on itself. The destruction of the communication array had triggered a cascade failure in the facility's quantum foundations. All ships, emergency retreat, she ordered. Get clear of the collapse zone. The Allied fleet scattered as the origin point imploded. Reality twisted around the dying structure, creating spatial distortions that would last for centuries. When the light faded, there was nothing left but empty space and the drifting wreckage of the Harbinger fleet. The ancient empire was broken. The threat that had consumed entire civilizations was ended, and it had been accomplished not by superior technology or perfect tactics, but by beings who understood that sometimes chaos was stronger than order. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and damage reports flowed in, Chen received a message that made her smile. It was from Elder Siltar, one of the Veiltar refugees who had learned to fight. Admiral, the crystal being's musical voice said through the communication system, our people have a new song, a song of gratitude to the beings who heard our cry and answered it. May we sing it for you? The transmission filled with harmonious voices, crystal beings singing together across the ruins of their former enemy. But this was not a song of mourning or loss. It was a song of hope, of survival, of the bonds forged between species who had learned to fight together. As the music played, other voices joined in, Thakron warriors adding their deep battle chants, ethereal empaths contributing emotional resonance that made the song touch the hearts of every listener. Even the logical quantum minds found ways to add mathematical harmonies to the growing chorus, and underneath it all, barely audible but unmistakably present, were human voices. The beings from the death world called Earth, singing along with the species they had taught to survive. The war was over. The galaxy was saved, and across the stars the echo of that victory song would remind future generations of a simple truth.